Bust it.
They present the popular radio program Political Platform on the Ray Power FM network. Ray Power FM Political Platform, now on television. Keep track of the country's polity and be part of the process as they discuss and put political developments in the country into perspective. It's Ray Power Political Platform.
Hello and welcome to Political Platform. My name is Amechi Anakwe. Beautiful Monday here at the nation's capital. The Harmattan breeze gradually taking over the airwaves and of course bringing the dust and the cold that do come with it. But the political turf remains hot as usual. One threat we identified as the biggest for our democracy, especially the 2019 election, is the increasing incidence of vote buying. We saw in Edo, Ondo, and Anambra governorship election. We promised to bring to the studio the Director General of the National Orientation Agency, Garuba Abare, last week, and he has graciously joined us this morning. We shall be tackling that issue, an ugly trend and development that we must stamp out, allow the citizens to exercise their franchise to the best of their conscience, and not to sell their votes for a pot of porridge. Beyond that, other sundry issues, the real political issues developing. Former Vice President Atiku Abubakar resigning from the APC. The dust erased yet to settle down. We hear he has continued consultations with the different PDP stakeholders in the northeast of the country. Reactions have continued to come from the PDP and the APC camps. And then Amechi Anakwe is my name again, and Adebayo Bodure, as usual, is with us this morning.
Amechi, I think one worrisome thing for me is the continued rating of Nigeria in terms of governance by the Mo Ibrahim Governance Index. The report released last week is not something cheerful. And what that report is not something that we can ignore. The man has, the Sudanese British citizen has demonstrated his capacity to use his wealth to facilitate good governance in the African continent. And when you have a situation where Nigeria is being rated poorly, 35, we took the 35th position out of 54. It's not something cheerful. And if you look at the trend since 2006, when it began this annual ritual of judging governance in the African continent, and the way and manner Nigeria has been judged since 2006, and you see smaller African countries like Botswana, which at one time or the other Nigeria helped to develop. The civil service in Botswana, for instance, was developed through the help of a Nigerian who was deployed to them. The judiciary in Botswana was built by the late Akintola Aguda, who helped them set up their judiciary. The first university in Botswana was established through the help of a Nigerian. So you see such countries making progress in terms of governance, and our nation is being rated poorly. I think it's something very, very worrisome.
It's not just being rated above Nigeria. They are the reference point now. The international organizations and institutions who readily advise Nigeria, take a look at Botswana and, of course, do what they are doing in terms of good governance. Elected political office holders delivering, of course, what we call it in Nigeria, dividends of democracy to their people. Elsewhere, it is do your work. No magic, no rocket science. Do it according to the books, and the citizenry will be better off for it. Last week on this program, we lamented heavily about a prediction by an international organization, a non-governmental organization, that in 2018, there will be 82 million poor Nigerians. Nigeria will displace India as the country with the highest number of poor people in the world. When you talk about it, then you look at the ranking of countries in terms of good governance in Africa, and you see where Nigeria is, then you can understand why, when other countries are moving people out of poverty, we are moving them into poverty. Brazil moved millions out of poverty, and Nigeria is succeeding in moving people into poverty. And it boils down to good governance. Anyway, we'll leave that. We'll talk more on this. Let's bring you in. Let's share your thoughts, your sentiments, your comments on topical national issues. That'll be after this short break. Please don't get away.
Bust it.
They present the popular radio program political platform on the Ray Power FM network. Ray Power FM political platform, now on television. Keep track of the country's polity and be part of the process as they discuss and put political developments in the country into perspective. It's Ray Power political platform.
Welcome back from the break. It's the mail segment, and I am Chidima Enyi.
And I am Etenikang Akepu. You're welcome.
We'll begin with a mail from Izundu Odemina in Lagos State, where he's writing on the former President Atiku's resignation from APC and defection to PDP. He says, the recent resignation of former Vice President Atiku from APC party is a gross indication of his selfish political interest against the good wish to serve the masses. PDP should be conscious of this act from one of the agents that worked and opposed them in 2015. The same motive that ejected him from APC to his abandoned PDP will still force him out if he didn't actualize his interest. This is highly unpolitical and antithetical to ideal politicking. Long live Federal Republic of Nigeria.
And more reaction to Atiku's departure from the APC, and he hasn't really pitched tent with the PDP yet. And Martins in Plateau State says, many people seize the occasion of your departure from APC to ridicule you for being inconsistent, but I see it differently. I see your eventual political sojourn as a restlessness of a passionate patriot seeking for the best and most appropriate platform to serve the people. It is true you have changed political parties, but your ideology remains intact, and your commitment for the realization of an equitable, inclusive, and prosperous Nigeria that will provide enabling ground, including infrastructures and economic opportunities to support the least Nigerian to pursue and achieve his vision. That is what matters. Sir, it is wisdom to change tactics so long as you keep the big picture in view. I wish you the very best in your aspirations.
Away from that, Paul Oguche from Ojo in Lagos State asks on the whereabouts of immediate past SGF. He says, for the greater part of this year, the mess around the former SGF over the contract scam enveloped our political space as if we get choked. Now that the investigation has been concluded and the culprit shown the way out, will the case just die like that? We have heard so much about the anti-corruption stance of this government, and for an administration that prides itself on such, the SGF is supposed to be behind bars by now. Unfortunately, Nigeria has become a country where the laws are made for different categories of persons. The ruling party should take note that Nigeria are watching, and some of those things will form the strong opinion that will change the course of events come 2019.
And away from that, Sheon Adegbo in Abuja writes on the spate of violence caused by insurgency. He says, we are saddened with the news of many casualties from the Mubi Mosque bomb blast and the death of 3 soldiers over the weekend. To get a different result, it is high time we started using a new approach. The use of military alone seems to be limited in the fight against insurgency. I want to advise the state and the federal government to consider the following steps. 1. Have a robust residence identity cards database for North and Northeast states. It is difficult to distinguish between a Nigerian and a foreigner. 2. Use of cash for information. Local residents can give valuable information for as low as 3,000 naira compensation. And 3. Use of drones and CCTV cameras. By now, major towns should have solar-powered CCTV cameras. And use of technology will go a long way in winning the war against insurgency. Don't give up, Nigeria.
Over now to recent activities in Zimbabwe. Peredi Ejemi writes and says, Mugabe ruled Zimbabwe for 37 years. In his 37 years, Nigeria had Shagari, Buhari, Babangida, Shonakan, Abacha, Abdusalam, Obasanjo, Yar Adua, Jonathan, and now Buhari. Mugabe gave his country 24 hours power supply, but our 9 presidents could not give us power supply. Mugabe did not borrow, but we borrowed despite resources. Still, no light. If other countries are celebrating the fall of Mugabe, it should not be Nigeria. I would rather have a Mugabe in Nigeria than the bunch of never-do-wells we've had in 37 years. We need to learn from Zimbabweans.
And more lessons from Zimbabwe to Nigeria. Jacob Shuaibu in Kubwa, Abuja says, people who speak down on education can now see what education has done for Zimbabweans. No car burnt, no house burnt, no buildings destroyed, and no life lost. And yet they have removed a president from office. The effect of their education shows it may not make everyone a millionaire or rich, but it certainly produces rich minds. We need to learn from Zimbabweans and the just concluded Anambra governorship election ahead of 2019.
And that's it for today's mail segment. We expect more from you by tomorrow. The route hasn't changed. It's still political platform at yahoo.com.
Bust it.
They present the popular radio program Political Platform on the Ray Power FM network. Ray Power FM Political Platform, now on television. Keep track of the country's polity and be part of the process as they discuss and put political developments in the country into perspective. It's Ray Power Political Platform.
Thank you so much for remaining with us. Our former presidents never do well where we may not agree with you. There are issues, but of course, our leaders, we respect them highly and we reckon with some of their numerous achievements. Zimbabwe may have better issues in some aspects, not all. There are so many areas I believe were a reference point for Africa. But in terms of democracy, the way we handle our elections, the succession in 2015 is one the whole world has indeed lauded and said we need to borrow a leaf from Nigeria. So there are some issues in Zimbabwe, but our leaders have done so well to, of course, make sure that we get a better living conditions. Uju Ejei is joining us this morning.
Amici, I think one other thing that writer forgot to mention is that in Zimbabwe, the land is owned by the people. The resources on the land is owned by the people without any form of meddlesomeness by outsiders. And that is a great thing, because if you look at, what makes a people who they are, what enriches a people, that your resources are in your hands, that your land is in your hands. Once those are tampered with, you really don't have much to fall back on. So that's one more kudos for Mugabe.
Now let's continue to build and deepen our democracy. 2019 elections, not too far away, just a little over a year before over 68 million, if I'm right, Nigerians who are registered with their PVCs will be trooping out to exercise their franchise. The political turf is getting more active. Of course, some persons in the two parties have announced their intentions to go for the presidency. The APC saying yes, the president is there, but he's not going to get automatic ticket. We're going to indeed make the stage democratic. A lot of activities in the PDP, some people moving and out. Of course, the stage is getting hotter and getting set. But the role to be played by the electorate is the most critical and the most strategic in that election. Vote buying is an ugly incident we have seen in recent times in Nigeria, and we identified it as a big threat to Nigeria's democracy. And of course, one agency in Nigeria, the National Orientation Agency, that has the responsibility of orientating Nigerians, inculcating the right values in our citizens on how to discharge their responsibilities, is one that we say we must hear from to, of course, share their thoughts and, of course, what they are doing to indeed nip this ugly trend of a vote buying in the board. Garba Abari is the DG of the National Orientation Agency and is joining us now. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Are you as much concerned as we are with this rising trend of vote buying?
Every Nigerian should be. I am.
So have you been doing anything towards that regard?
Well, I think the issue is as complex and as complicated as all other issues that have to do with our national development challenges. The issue of vote buying is not a threat to our democracy. On the other hand, I think it is a symptom of a bigger disease. It's a symptom of a bigger disease to the extent that the entire democratic process has to be looked at holistically. What is it that the country has benefited from 1999 to now in terms of good governance, in terms of service delivery, in terms of direct connection between the leaders and the elect, in terms of expanding the political space, in terms of absolute citizens' inclusion in decision making and even in policy implementation. In terms of there are so many things that you actually have to look at first before you even begin to look at the issue of why people sell their votes.
So your conclusion is that people sell their votes because of some deep problems in our political system.
Absolutely. So many problems that are afflicting the political process and the political space. And of course, it also goes to show how low we have sunk in terms of our values. Not necessarily political values, but all sorts of values. Political, social, economic values. How the state in itself has failed in both its distributive and its productive and distributive functions. How the Nigerian state actually is also conscripting the political space by its actions or lack of it. So I think it is a concern for every Nigerian. It is a concern for, most importantly, the system and the process.
What are these bigger problems that the symptom now is vote by?
Okay, fine. There is first and foremost direct disconnect between those who go to canvass for the votes and when eventually they get the votes, they never get back to connect with the people. This one. So the issue of vote buying therefore is like, this democracy to me is only the dividend of this democracy to me is only what I get as far as today is concerned. So it's either Gary or a pack of Magic Cube or 200 naira or 500 naira or 1,000 naira, depending on the place, depending on the time, depending on also the desperation of the buyer, and of course also the willingness of the seller. That's one. Two, is also the failure of institutional functions. What are political parties doing? Because they are not only supposed to be platforms for the electoral contest, they are also supposed to mobilize and to educate and to synthesize. What is INEC doing? What does the law say about this? What are the inputs in respect of this kind of misdemeanor as far as the electoral law is concerned? Now, what are the security agencies doing? That's one. So you can see it is actually an entire gamut, of a social decomposition, if I would say. It's an entire gamut of a social, of a system that is not only dead, but a system that is already decomposing. Now, what is the National Orientation Agency doing? And this is the question. We in the National Orientation Agency, like I have said, are not any less worried. In fact, we are perhaps much more worried than any other person because it's part of our mandate to orientate. But then, the reorientation is one, but the functionality of the reorientation itself also is dependent on so many things. The social environment, the political environment, the values from the families, the values from the schools. Unless all of these are taken together, what the National Orientation Agency will be doing is actually to be addressed, to go on a wounded race. And that is why the agency is faced with humongous problems across the social and political space.
So what you're saying is that all the other formal levels of education appear to have collapsed.
Everything. That's the point. And of course, we Nigerians must be open and come to terms with this basic reality. Because unless we are able to do that, then definitely we will just be groping in the dark and actually be pretending. The truth of the matter is this democracy needs to do better than it is doing today.
Well, you have somewhat hit the nail on the head, but some people would probably throw the challenge back at you because the National Orientation Agency seem to have gone down in the last few years. I remember when it was so vibrant with jingles, even jingles that affected lives positively. But in the last few years, it's like most people would even probably remember NOA right now, as we mentioned you as the DG of that agency. What is responsible for this? Because you are supposed to do most of the correcting but the agency has not been forthcoming.
We are doing as much as the system allows. We are doing as much as the system allows. So that's one. Two, we are also not oblivious of the responsibility, and that is why we are doing it at different levels. First, we feel that the starting point should be to create a stakeholder platform, which we have been doing, working with civil society, organizations that are working in the area of election and electoral processes, partnering INEC, partnering security organizations, and also talking with other donor agencies who are working in the areas of politics and political support. That's one. Two, at the level of the school system, do not forget that the National Orientation Agency has also had and had returned the teaching of civics. Has returned the teaching of civics to schools.
Civic education.
Civic education to school. And this is actually one of the wars that the National Orientation Agency has won. We have the teaching of civic education has been sent back to school. And that is why we feel if we cannot begin to bend the tree from the very top, then we should begin to water it and nurture it from the lower level. Because at the larger society, there is what I can call a general apathy towards or lack of receptive tendency, in terms of changing perceptions, ideas, ideals, attitudes. But when we begin from the lower levels, if you can see the last 1 year, not all, but most of our advocacy programs are in schools.
So you're
in the schools,
laying the foundation.
We are laying from there. Most of our advocacy programs in the last 1 year have been concentrated in the schools. This is where we feel that if indeed we are to produce leaders of tomorrow, then these leaders of tomorrow must actually be inculcated with the correct values. Now, we also send out messages. 2 days or so ago, I was in Dutse and somebody was asking me, what are you doing about cinemas? In those days, we have been seeing you in villages. I said, what then? If you are expecting me to operate the National Orientation Agency or run it in the way it was run 30 years ago, then definitely we can't do that. You can't see me do that. So many things have changed. The environment is no longer the same. The demographic composition is no longer the same. We are dealing with a citizenry, with a demographic structure with 70% or more of the population below the age of 35. It's a very punished demographic structure, but it is a reality. And you are dealing with people who are mostly always active on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Facebook, on Instagram, on To-Go, on WhatsApp, on whatever. So this kind of people are the ones that you will reach out to first. And this is what we are doing.
Yeah.
I invite you to be following us on our Twitter handle and on our Facebook page and on our Instagram page and see actually what we have been doing in order to reach out to this very critical segment of the Nigerian population that we want, whose attitude we want to change, and whose attitude we also want not only change but actually be brought in as a driver of a new society.
Yeah, let's look at two problems. Beyond this issue of vote buying, the vote buying itself is part of the larger problem of monetization of politics in Nigeria. In the Second Republic, you find people without a savings up to 10,000 naira winning election, even without money to print posters. But these days, even to win primary is a bigger problem. You need to have deep pockets. Beyond that is the issue that is afflicting our politics, the tendency to form as many political parties as possible, even though we are in a multi-party democracy. The problem this has posed is that we now have long ballot paper, which in the process of folding is creating a bigger problem of invalidating votes. What is the NOA doing in tackling this problem? Monetization of politics and the issue of invalid votes. A situation where you have We have seen one presidential election where over 2 million votes were rejected.
Well, that is also a big problem, and the NOA is like I have told you, we are working with the political directorate and the voter education of the Independent National Electoral Commission, and also with the political parties. Like I have told you, look, Nigeria's political parties are only platform for power contestation. That's the problem. They are not supposed to be that only.
They're supposed to do.
They are also supposed to do voter education, just like others should do voter education, just like civil society should do voter education, just like a national orientation agency is also to do voter education. So there are actually so many agencies that should be involved in voter education. But like I have said, like Boduni has said, the truth of the matter is the situation is no longer the same. Monetization of politics and the political process is also but a function of a much deep-seated problem, because it has to do fundamentally with our even leadership, recruitment, and the development process.
You said something about reaching out to the youth through Twitter, through Facebook, and if they could follow. But I hope you realize that even there are a lot of people in this age bracket who do not have access to phones that have Facebook or Twitter, particularly in the rural areas. How do you reach out to them?
I have when I came on board, I came up with a policy with a platform.
In 30 seconds.
I added a platform called the Local Government Assembly. Now, this local government assembly is an advocacy and a sensitization assembly that we take to the local governments. Who are in the local government assembly? Traditional rulers, religious leaders, women groups, youth groups, NYSC, security agencies, civil society, labor, political parties, opinion holders in the community. In every local government assembly, we talk to about 800 to 1,000 people.
Okay.
And at the end by the time you finish whatever messaging you are going to deliver, it is like talking to an entire household.
Well,
all the household.
Definitely,
this
one session will not be adequate for us to really, of course, share what you're doing with Nigerians and indeed jointly seek for solutions to our political problem. Thank you so much, Agara Babari, DG National Orientation Agency, for joining us on the program today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for being part of it too. We return on Tuesday with another edition. My name is Amichana. We have a good day.
Busted.